They thought I wouldn't come. They believed shame could hold back someone who had crawled through a live minefield, blood dripping from their shoulder just to save a soldier on the brink of death. They were wrong. And truthfully, they never understood me. Not ever. The wedding invitation sat silently on the steel desk in my Stuttgart base office, as if it didn't carry an emotional bomb ready to detonate. A white envelope, edges lined with metallic sheen, my name embossed in soft serif font, Lieutenant General Natalie Anne Monroe. I picked it up unopened because I already knew what was inside. An invitation. A sweet trap. A cold message from people who once shared dinners with me, hugged me at my graduation, then quietly erased me from every family list because I wasn't what they expected. My sister Haley was getting married. She'd chosen the last man I'd ever imagined entering any chapter of my life, Captain James Foster, the soldier I saved in Afghanistan 7 years ago. I still remember every detail of that day. The scorching wind, the dust and the blaring sirens. James gasping for breath amidst the wreckage of a blown-up armored vehicle. I ran through a hail of bullets, sliding across gravel, clinging to the faint breaths he had left. I remember the screech of metal as I disarmed the explosive under his foot. And I remember his whisper through blood and smoke, "I owe you my life." Maybe he forgot. Maybe not. But now he was marrying Haley, the one who once told me in front of our mother that someone like you shames the entire Monroe family. If you've ever taken a mental punch from your own kin, drop a comment. Sometimes we need to know we're not the only ones surviving words colder than bullets. Outside my window, the training yard buzzed with recruits. They jumped, shouted, sweated in the chill of a German spring. I used to be like them, full of fire, unstabbed in the back, believing sacrifice was always seen. Now I know the real cost isn't on the battlefield. The door opened. No knock. Only one person was that casual Colonel David Simmons, my advisor through 3 tours, the only one in the military who dared see me as a person, not a rank. He glanced at the envelope. "You going?" I didn't answer. "Foster," he nodded, tying the thread from the battlefield to the upcoming party. "It's really him. It's him." We sat in silence. Simmons never pushed. He only asked questions when he knew I was ready to hear my own answers. "So what do you want from this wedding?" he asked. I took a deep breath. Maybe to be seen, or to prove I still exist. "You planning to fight or bury a ghost?" he said without judgment. I gave a dry laugh. Maybe just to watch it burn. He stood, heading for the door. Before leaving, he turned, voice low. "Don't wear your stars like armor. Wear them like a memory. Let them see who you've become without them." His words were a quiet command. They made me stand open my laptop and book a flight to DC. No base notification. No sharing with anyone. I chose a red eye. Window seat. Silence. On the flight from Frankfurt, I sat in 3C in civilian clothes. My dress uniform was folded neatly in my bag. The flight attendant glanced at my name tag and smiled. "Champagne, General." "I'm not here to celebrate," I replied softly, choosing water. Below the clouds was the ocean. Inside me was a layer of untouched memories. Not because I was afraid, but because no one wanted to hear them. I landed at Dulles 15 minutes early. When my phone buzzed, an unknown number flashed. I answered. "You're actually coming," Haley's voice unmistakable. Still sweet. Still sharp. I didn't respond. "I thought Mom couldn't convince you anymore." "But I guess it still works," she said with a light laugh. "I'm not here for Mom." "Then why?" "For me." She went silent for a second. "James is looking forward to seeing you. You two always had good chemistry." Then she hung up. I stepped out of the airport. DC's April breeze wasn't cold enough to dull the sting at the back of my neck. On the way to Alexandria, I avoided the highway. I took the roads I used to bike as a kid. The old church, the old gas station. And finally, the house where I once thought I belonged. A white picket gate, a manicured lawn, everything perfect to the point of artifice. Like my mother, Vivian Monroe, who opened the door without a smile, without a greeting. "You're here," she said, eyeing my uniform. "Please don't cause trouble. This is Haley's wedding." "Trouble was here before I put on this uniform, Mom," I replied, stepping inside. The house was quiet. The scent of lemon and polished wood. No memories here welcomed me. Only family photos, no trace of me after 2018. Dinner that night, 15 people. I sat at the end of the table. No one mentioned Helmand. No one asked about Kosovo. They talked about the wedding menu. the cake, the dress style. I didn't eat. I just watched and remembered Simmons's words. You don't need to shout to be heard. Just stand still long enough for them to realize your presence can't be ignored. The house at 117 Sycamore Street stood proud, like an over-painted portrait. The lawn trimmed to every edge, peonies blooming on cue, a wind chime tinkling on the porch like the soundtrack to a perfect family ad. But stepping through the door, I knew nothing here was intact. Mom opened the door after my second ring. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on the small badge on my jacket like it was dirt. No smile, no hug. Just one line. You're here. Haley's trying on makeup with the artist. Hi, Mom, I said. No reply. She turned, leaving the door open like a reluctant invitation. I stepped in, taking a deep breath. The familiar lemon scent rose from the wood floors, the tabletops, the walls clean, polished, suffocating like the years I lived here. On the fireplace mantel photos stood in perfect rows, like a visual manifesto. Haley's graduation, Haley in Paris, Haley with James. No photos of me. I didn't expect any. I just wanted to see how thoroughly I'd been erased. I once stood right there. The year I made Colonel Mom had me pose for a family keepsake. She printed it, I remember clearly. Black and white medium size. I looked around, no trace. Maybe it's buried in a drawer. Or thrown out. Maybe she never kept it. Your old room, Mom said, still adjusting the curtains as if my presence required rearranging the space to fit. My old room was on the second floor end of the hall. The stairs creaked as I climbed familiar. But when I opened the door, I froze. Everything had changed. The wall, once covered with maps of military campaigns, now held landscape art. The bookshelf, once stuffed with West Point manuals, was now lined with romance novels. Ivory bedsheets, lavender-scented pillows, perfect with no trace of my memories. I gave a faint smile. It felt like coming home to find my name replaced with a guest room sign. If you've ever returned to a place you called home, only to find it erased every trace of you drop a comment, I've been invisible. Maybe you and I have more in common than we think. I sat on the bed's edge. My jacket still carried the faint smell of the plane and memories. In the mirror on the vanity, I saw myself, hardened face, unyielding eyes, but something rippled beneath the discipline, a small crack. A nameless void. The door creaked open. Haley stood there. I thought you wouldn't come, she said, leaning against the frame, hair loosely pinned, face bare, but still sharp enough to cut. You knew I would, I replied, eyes fixed on the mirror. Yeah, that's so you. She gave a short laugh like a light jab. Always on time, always doing the right thing, even when no one needs it. I turned to face my sister. It had been a long time since I'd been this close to her. Haley, the little girl who once chased me around the house, begging me to teach her how to fold blankets military style. Now the woman about to walk down the aisle with the man I saved without blinking. How's James? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Haley shrugged. He says he's still grateful to you. But what'll you be at his wedding? A witness, or an obstacle? This time I didn't answer. Not because I had no words, but because I chose to save them for the right moment. Haley stepped in, sitting on the chair by my old desk, now a vanity. You know, she said, her tone softening, suddenly Mom was proud of you once. Back at West Point, when the papers mentioned your name. But you kept drifting away. Or Mom kept pulling back, I replied. A brief silence. Anyway, you should smile more, Haley said, standing smoothing the dress draped over her arm. People will see you frowning in the wedding photos and think I forced you to come. I laughed for the first time that day. Not because it was funny, but because Haley always said something seemingly harmless that hit exactly where it hurt. Don't worry, I know how to act. The military teaches that well. Good. Haley stepped toward the door. Oh, Mom says don't wear your dress uniform. It's too serious. Doesn't fit the vibe. The door closed. I sat alone, staring at the wall. I noticed something odd between two landscape paintings was a new, delicate frame. Inside a photo of Haley and Mom smiling in a garden. Date taken the same day as Dad's funeral. I remember that day. I wore my uniform. Stood far from the front row because no one saved me a seat. I wasn't invited to speak. No one handed me a mic. No one said my name. And they standing behind the funeral taking photos. Smiling. I didn't blame Dad. He was a Navy lieutenant colonel. He taught me how to retreat when I couldn't advance. But he also taught me honor isn't given by others. It's what you hold, even when no one stays. That night I went to the kitchen for water. The house was silent like a museum after hours. I saw Mom sitting alone in the living room, dim light, a glass of wine in hand. "Not asleep yet?" she asked, not turning. "Not yet." A pause. She took a small sip. "I dreamed you'd be a doctor. Or a professor. Close to home, married, with kids." She gave a faint laugh. "You chose the battlefield. And then you drifted away." "I didn't choose to drift from you. I just didn't choose to be what you wanted." She turned. Her eyes held something unexpected exhaustion, as if she couldn't hold the mask anymore. "Tomorrow, don't ruin the wedding, please." I nodded. No promise, just acknowledgement. We sat there, two women used to staying guarded, no hugs, no tears, no letting go. But it was a form of communication, and for us, maybe that was enough. I went back to my room. It started raining outside. I opened my suitcase, pulled out my dress uniform. The one I wore when I brought James back from Helmand. The one I wore when I got my second star. I hung it up, smoothing every crease, every fold. Not to perform, but to remind myself I'm still me. Some rooms don't need doors to make you feel excluded. The way they look at you, or don't, is enough to tell you you don't belong. The pre-wedding party was held at an old mansion outside Alexandria, once home to a banking tycoon, now an upscale event venue. Every brick on the entry path gleamed with expectation and judgment. I arrived early, military habit, and a way to scout the battlefield before stepping in. The front door opened to soft violin music from hidden speakers. Staff in black and white uniforms moved like an elegantly dressed strike team. Everything was staged like a diplomatic gala, not a family party. I handed over my invitation. The receptionist checked the list, nodded with the neutral expression typical of such places. No welcoming smile beyond duty. I was used to that. In the military, some salute you, only because they have to. I walked through the marble hallway into the main hall where the party was starting. No one looked at me. Not because they didn't see, but because they saw and chose to ignore. Maybe I dressed wrong. I wore a simple black suit with only a bronze Special Forces insignia pin a memory I couldn't let go. It didn't sparkle like Haley's diamond bracelet, but it carried the weight of years I'd survived. I stood at the entrance for no more than 30 seconds when Mom Vivian glided over, moving like the hostess of a political fundraiser. She air-kissed both my cheeks like greeting a distant acquaintance. I didn't lean in, but she acted like I did. "You're here good. Don't linger at the door too long." "Guests might think you're security," she said softly, touching my elbow as if guiding me into a frame. I didn't react. I was used to her making me invisible with polite words. "Table 9, she said. "Far right corner by the side door." "Fewer people, easier to talk." "Easier to forget," I murmured. She didn't respond. Just gave a tight-lipped smile and turned away as if I'd said something foolish. I found table 9. As expected, it was on the edge of the garden near where the staff exited the temporary kitchen. No one I knew. 2 distant cousins, one of Haley's college friends, and a middle-aged couple who thought I was the bride's high school roommate. I didn't correct them. Partly from boredom, partly to see how far they'd imagine me. No one asked about me. They talked about the weather, the wine, the band. A young woman glanced at the pin on my chest and asked, "You do security for someone you look professional." I smiled faintly. "I've protected people who could order global airstrikes." She laughed, thinking I was joking. Maybe to her a woman who doesn't smile much could only be a VIP bodyguard. I didn't blame her. She wasn't the first. "If you've ever been underestimated just because you don't fit the mold, drop a comment. I've been mislabeled too. Trust me, you're not alone." Time for speeches. Haley stepped onto the flower-draped wooden platform pastel blue dress, hugging her frame hair cascading softly perfect like a living Pinterest board. She held the mic with the poise of someone who'd lied often and still got believed. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with sweetness that could make you miss the needles. "I'm so lucky to be surrounded by family friends and even a few silent warriors." She looked at me. I knew that moment was for me. "I'm so glad my sister Natalie is here tonight, despite her busy job guarding national security and important gates." Scattered chuckles. Mom didn't laugh, but she nodded slightly as if agreeing. I sipped my white wine, letting the chill soothe my chest. She's a woman of few words, few smiles, but always on time. Always by the book. Truly admirable. The laughter grew louder. A few eyes turned to me as if verifying the caricature she'd painted. I set my glass down, stood slowly. Table 9 went silent. Other tables started noticing. Haley froze. No one expected me to speak. I walked to the center of the lawn, no mic. I looked straight at Haley. "I don't guard gates," I said, voice just loud enough to carry. "I guard the country." The room stilled. No laughter. No whispers. Even the breeze seemed to pause. "And I once pulled a man out of a live minefield. Not so he could be your groom, but so he could live." Haley opened her mouth, but I returned to my seat before she could respond. An older man, maybe a friend of my father's, whispered, "I remember you. Helmand, right?" I nodded slightly. "You were at Lieutenant Colonel Monroe's funeral, but no one invited you to the front row." "I'm used to standing," I said. The party went on, but it wasn't the same. A few discreet glances came my way. Not dismissal anymore. Awareness. I didn't need the room to applaud. I just needed them to know I was there. And still am. When I left the party, a drizzle started. I didn't bring an umbrella. Soldiers don't fear getting wet. We fear losing ourselves. If you've ever been placed at a table no one wanted to sit at yet, kept your back straight and your heart unbent, drop a comment. I stood up. Some ceremonies aren't meant to bless. They're staged to legitimize exclusion. And some white wedding dresses can't hide the cruelty sewn into their lace. I arrived at the Grand D.C. Cathedral at 9 a.m. sharp as printed on the invitation. Early sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting odd patterns on the tiled floor. This was the same church where my father, Navy Lieutenant Colonel Monroe, had his send-off. I stood in the back row, then unacknowledged, unnamed. Today, I returned. This time in full dress uniform hat, stars, medals, everything I'd bled for. I chose it not to defy, but to remind myself I didn't come empty-handed. I came as a soldier and a daughter pushed out of the frame. No one greeted me at the door. No one showed me to a seat. I found my own fourth row left side reserved for close family. A stranger already sat there turning to me as if I'd wandered into the wrong movie. "Sorry, this seat's for the bride's family," she said quietly. "I'm the bride's sister," I replied, just as quiet but clear as a march order. She faltered. Said nothing more. Maybe it was my look or the medals glinting on my chest unfit for argument. I sat. Around me whispers spread like ripples. A few heads turned, not out of admiration, curiosity or discomfort. My presence was like a typo in a prepared speech, a mistake no one dared correct, but all wanted to ignore. The music started. Haley entered in a strapless white gown, crystals tracing her spine. She was beautiful, the kind of beauty trained to be beautiful. Nothing accidental, nothing real. James waited at the altar in marine dress uniform, crisp as the last time I saw him in Hellman's recovery ward. Our eyes met and he gave a slight nod. No smile, no avoidance. Just a small nod, as if he still owed me something. The wedding proceeded by the book pastor hymns, vows, all like a copied script. But then came the personal remarks where the bride could share a few words with loved ones. Haley stepped to the mic, bouquet in hand. She smiled at the crowd, then locked eyes with me. "Before I begin," she said, "I want to thank everyone for coming. And those who came uninvited." Soft laughter like an inside joke. Mom Vivian sat in the front row, eyes fixed on the altar, unblinking. "I know some people think they're part of the family, but sharing blood doesn't mean sharing values." Haley said, her voice light as a breeze but sharp as a razor. "Some spend their lives fighting the world, and think that makes them above the rest. But the truth is sometimes that military grit makes them impossible to live with in a normal family." More laughter now. The discreet kind, as if everyone agreed, but no one wanted to laugh loudest. Mom turned, looking straight at me, and said, not through the mic, but loud enough for the row to hear, "She's the stain on our family." I didn't move. I didn't need to. I'd been in bases shelled for 3 days straight. Seen comrades lose half their face and still smile. I knew pain, and I knew when not to waste emotion on a poorly staged act. I sat still, but someone else couldn't. James. He left his spot at the altar, walked down straight toward me. Every eye followed. Haley froze. The pastor stopped mid-sentence, flustered. James stood before me and in the dead silent crowd saluted me full military honors. "I salute Lieutenant General Monroe." The salute hit the stone floor like a weight. The room went still. James turned to the crowd. "She pulled me from a live minefield. I owe her my life, and I can't stand here in this uniform letting anyone mock the person who saved me." Haley grabbed the mic. "James, what are you doing?" He looked at her. Not angry, not bitter, just a man done lying to himself. I'm standing on the right side. Then he turned to me. Thank you. I stood. Didn't salute back. Didn't need to. We were once comrades. And sometimes respect doesn't need a reply, just recognition. No one spoke. Not the pastor. Not the guests. Not my mother. I turned and left the row. Not because I was hurt. I walked away because I'd done the one thing I came for to let them see. I no longer needed their validation of my honor. Honor doesn't live in applause. It lives in the silence after a salute, when no one dares laugh anymore. The silence after a military salute, if you've ever felt it, is unlike any other. It's not empty. It's dense, heavy as steel. Harder than the stairs that once tried to bury you. And sometimes just one salute, right person, right moment is enough to shift a lifetime. I'd been saluted many times. On parade grounds, in Pentagon meeting rooms, on a metal podium in freezing Ramstein. But never had a salute made my throat tighten like this. James stood there in the white carpeted aisle of the wedding dress uniform, pristine black shoes reflecting the chandelier light. Everyone stood, but only he stood tall. Feet together, right hand to temple, eyes unblinking. His voice rang out firm as a march order. Salute to Lieutenant General Natalie Monroe, my commander. I didn't react immediately. I felt every eye on me as if they were seeing a statue that had stood quietly behind the stage, now coming alive in a celebration meant for other names. No one laughed. No one smirked. Even Haley, standing 2 steps from James, froze, until she collapsed. The rustle of her wedding dress hit the floor. Her bouquet dropped, then murmurs. Mom gasped softly. A few rushed to help Haley. But the silence from that salute lingered in the room. It hung like a curtain no one dared lift. And then something I didn't expect happened. An older man stood. I recognized him. Brigadier General Howard, retired since 2017. Former NATO delegation commander in Europe. He stepped into the aisle, faced me. Without a word, he raised his hand, a sharp, unyielding military salute. Then a second person, Colonel Ruth Langston, who served with me in Kabul. She left her table, stood tall, saluted. Then a third. A fourth. A line of senior officers, old comrades, even people I barely recalled from defense conferences. They stood one by one, hands to temples, holding steady in a room full of evening gowns and champagne. No one spoke. They just saluted. But each salute was a confirmation I was here. I was worthy. I was no longer erased from the family map, because I'd been drawn on the map of honor. James held his salute. But this time he didn't look at me. He turned to the crowd, his voice the one that once gave orders in battle. She saved my life. I'll never forget that. But you, what have you done for her? No one answered. Not Mom. Not relatives. Not Haley's friends. They looked at each other, avoiding my eyes, James's the saluting officers. I said nothing. And that made them unable to look away. I just stood still, not saluting back, not stepping forward. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is hold your ground in a room that once pushed you to the edge. Mom left her seat. She went to Haley, whispering something no one heard. An aunt murmured to her, "This wasn't in the plan." Of course it wasn't. And me, I thought of Simmons, who told me, "Don't wear your stars like armor. Wear them like memory." Now I understood. Memory placed right can change the present. Haley came too. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I returned, she said nothing. No sarcasm, no jabs. Just wide eyes, like she was seeing me truly for the first time. James stepped forward, offering his hand. Haley didn't take it. She sat there, head bowed, not crying, but her shoulders trembled slightly. The ceremony didn't continue. The pastor whispered a few words and retreated. Some guests grabbed their coats. The band stopped playing. No one dared raise a toast. The ceremony was halted not by a technical glitch, but by a truth brought to light. The bride wasn't the center today. Honor had reclaimed its rightful place. I left the hall while things were still unfinished. No need to wait for farewells. No need for anyone to check on me. On the church steps, I looked up. Thin clouds drifted a light breeze, and inside me a strange stillness. Not peace, but the end of a 6-year battle. I took a taxi to my hotel. No one came with me. I didn't need them to. That night I opened my laptop. An unread email from the military's internal system. An investigation report. about the anonymous letter that cost me a promotion in 2019. I clicked. The sender wasn't just Haley. Under the login name was an IP address tied to a familiar location, Mom's house. And the final analysis chilled me. The text wasn't written by Haley. She only sent it. The original content came from a personal device registered to Vivian Monroe. My feet went cold. Not from fear, but because some truths, even when you're prepared, still make you fall. Some truths don't need to be shouted to hurt. They just need to be whispered at the right time, in the right place, and they'll change how you see a person, even if that person is your mother. I sat in a sealed meeting room at the U.S. Army Judge Advocate General's office on F Street, Washington, D.C. Gray walls, cold glass table, and a military text analysis machine running its final program. On the screen, lines of code scrolled, then stopped at a conclusion in red. Match probability 94.7%. Original author subject Vivian Monroe. I stared at the words like someone peeled back a long-held illusion. I'd thought Mom just didn't understand me, that she was swayed by the perfect image she clung to for the family. I'd thought Haley, with her sly remarks and malice, was the root of my exclusion, my humiliation at gatherings, my absence at Dad's funeral. I was wrong. Haley wasn't the director. She was just the actor. The one holding the script was Mom. Want to see the detailed analysis? The IT officer asked. I nodded. Every line of the anonymous letter was dissected, semicolon placement, sentence structure, capitalization habits, all matched over 30 emails Vivian sent to local associations. The letter never named me, but described me as an officer with emotionally unstable behavior, prone to unilateral decisions unfit for senior leadership. That letter halted my promotion to lieutenant general a year before my official review. I'd thought it was some jealous insider. Who'd have guessed? I left the office, mind reeling. Fragmented memories pieced into a clear thread, how Mom always suggested I switch careers, act softer, let Haley shine a bit more. How she seemed embarrassed when I wore my uniform to family events. How she looked at me when I spoke as an officer, not a daughter. I texted Haley, 3 words, meet me. Now. She replied after 10 minutes, Old Cafe, 4 p.m. We had a favorite spot from high school 7th and QNW. They had apple pie Haley loved. I'd sit with black coffee and a book. We didn't talk much even then, but back then I still thought I was her sister. I arrived early. The cafe was quiet. Soft jazz played from a small speaker on the wood-paneled wall. I chose a corner table back to the door, a habit I dropped after the battlefield. But today, I needed to see Haley's face when she walked in. She came on time. Makeup still on from the unfinished wedding. No extra touch-up, no smile. You know, don't you? She asked, sitting down, no preamble. I looked at her. Mom wrote it. Haley nodded slowly. I thought it was you. No, she cut me off. I just typed it. I remember Mom editing every comma. I didn't dare refuse. I narrowed my eyes. Didn't dare or didn't want to. Haley looked at me, her eyes free of defiance for once. Just tired. Too tired for masks. Back then I hated you. I saw Mom sad, saw your name in the papers while I was always Natalie Monroe's little sister. I thought if Mom needed me to pull you down, I'd do it. I thought it'd make me feel bigger. I stayed silent. Her words, simple, brutal, cut like glass into a wound I thought had healed. It worked, I said, holding my coffee. But not anymore. Haley looked down. I knew it at the church. When he saluted you. When they stood. I've never had anyone look at me like that. You said Mom thought I tarnished the family image, I asked. Haley nodded. She said, no one's proud of a woman who talks like she's giving orders, walks like a soldier, and looks like she's about to slap someone. I gave a faint laugh. Mom never served a day, but she wanted everything under her control, even people. We sat there a while silent. The cafe filled up. A couple of students, an old man with a newspaper, a guy typing on a laptop. All quiet. And for the first time I felt I could breathe without holding a stance. If you've been sabotaged by family in the shadows, and one day learned it wasn't out of hate, but their obsession with control, drop a comment, I was bent by the ones who made me. I stood, left money on the table. Before leaving, I said, You're not a kid anymore. You can say no to Mom. Haley nodded slightly. No promise, no apology, but at least real. That night I returned to the old house. Mom was still there. Chamomile tea on the table, soft yellow light. No music, no greeting. I stood in the living room under the largest portrait, Mom and Dad's wedding, 1981. Mom in white lace. Dad in uniform. I used to love that photo until I realized I was born to be its backdrop. Mom wrote the letter. I didn't ask. I stated. She looked up. No denial. No panic. I had to, she said. For what to ruin my honor? To protect this family's reputation. You were going too far, Natalie. You don't know humility. You always make others feel small. I gave a soft laugh. No, I just didn't shrink to fit your frame. I did it to keep you safe. Safe in silence. Safe from being named at Dad's funeral. Safe from being cut out of every family photo. She didn't answer. I walked to the door. But before leaving, I said something I'd never said. You can erase my name from guest lists, but you can't erase me from history. I wrote it with blood effort and truth. I didn't look back. Some wounds don't bleed, but they demand to be voiced publicly, because if we stay silent forever, they become the norm. That morning, I walked into the Willard Convention Center with a strange mindset. No anger, no defense, and for the first time, no dodging anyone's gaze. Before me was the first press conference of the Resilience Foundation, an organization backed by the Pentagon, to push policies against internal discrimination in the military, especially for women. I'd helped build it last year quietly, during sleepless nights, over files everyone else wanted to forget. Today, I was asked to speak. But I wasn't invited as a veteran lieutenant general. I was here because I was a survivor of a war without bullets, but one that could make you disappear the war within your own family. As I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit my eyes, making me squint. The room was packed. Reporters, journalists, defense organizations, congressional reps, and young faces I didn't know, but they sat there silent, like they were waiting for something not in the script. I took the mic. No smile. No witty opener. I looked straight into the crowd and said, I'm Lieutenant General Natalie Monroe. I commanded a battalion in Helmand, oversaw security for U.S. diplomatic convoys in Eastern Europe, and was on the shortlist for Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army. I paused. A few nodded, likely familiar with my record. I'm also the person who was removed from that promotion process by an anonymous letter. That letter didn't come from a foreign military, not from a subordinate. It came from my own mother. The room went dead silent. In that letter, my mother wrote that I was emotionally unstable, unfit to represent the U.S. Army as a female commander, and my sister, who read the letter before sending, didn't object, because she thought it was normal. I heard keyboards clacking, recorders blinking. A few reporters stared unblinking. I kept my gaze steady, my voice unsoftened. How many of you, uniform or not, have been made to believe you're unworthy by your own family? How many have sat through dinners where no one mentioned your successes, but every mistake was magnified? How many had to abandon their dreams because they were too different from what others wanted? A young woman in the third row started crying. She didn't hide it. The person next to her handed her a tissue. When I paused, she stood asking to speak. The organizers hesitated, but I nodded. She gripped the mic, voice shaking. My sister was a defense systems engineer. She was forced to resign after reporting mild depression to her superior. They said she wasn't stable enough for high-pressure work. But the truth is, she wasn't weak. She was honest. I repeated her words clear, firm. We're not weak, we're honest. The room applauded for the first time that morning. Not loud, but sincere. I continued, I'm not here to tell my story alone. I'm here to say it's time for new armor, not bulletproof, but silence-proof against the kind that kills trust from within. Today, I formally propose the SHIELD Protocol, a legal framework to protect service members isolated by their closest circles, especially women minorities, and those with psychological differences. I gestured to the screen behind me. The first slide showed the Resilience Foundation logo. The second listed the core provisions of the SHIELD Protocol. No fluff, no ambiguity, clear as a strategic manifesto. We don't want privilege. We need justice. Justice starts with being heard, not silenced by old notions, family reputations, or nameless biases about what makes a suitable character. I stepped away from the mic, but before leaving the stage I heard a shout from the back. Ms. Monroe, do you still talk to your mother? The question, nosy as it sounded, silenced the room. I turned back slowly. I don't talk to her as a daughter anymore, but I'll always speak for the other daughters and sons who never got the chance to be heard. This time the applause roared like thunder. I stepped down. A few reporters tried to intercept me. I didn't stop. I'd said what needed saying. The rest wasn't mine to carry. It belonged to those in the seats below and those who never dared come. Sometimes the ones who hurt you most aren't enemies. They're the ones who knew what you needed, but chose silence when you fell. As I left the stage, my part in the press conference was done. I'd said everything I needed to. Honor wasn't something to reclaim anymore. It had stood up on its own through the years I lived truly, fought truly, and endured truly. I was heading down the backstage hallway when I heard a commotion behind me. A sharp call. "Please wait, I need to say this." The room buzzed. Cameras swung toward the voice. I turned. There she stood, clear and fragile, as if stepping into real light for the first time. Haley Monroe, my sister. No wedding dress, no party makeup, just a light-colored suit, hair tied back. Standing there among everyone's hands, steady eyes, no longer dodging. I didn't know what she'd say, but I felt it this time no one was directing her. The organizers scrambled, but when they saw I didn't stop her, they let her approach the mic. She walked up slowly, a bit awkward, but each step her own choice. Haley looked at the crowd, silent for a long moment. Too long for a mistake, but long enough that no one could pretend this was scripted. Then she spoke. "I'm Haley Monroe. I'm Lieutenant General Monroe's sister, but I'm not here as a proud sister. I'm here as someone who was jealous and wrong." The room went silent. For years I lived feeling not enough, not smart enough, not important enough, not noticed enough. And instead of facing that fear, I turned to hurting the one person who never tried to take anything from me. She paused, took a breath. I didn't blink. I didn't write the anonymous letter, but I typed it, every word. I read it aloud to my mother, and I didn't object, because part of me wanted to see her fall, so I could feel normal. A gasp echoed somewhere in the crowd, maybe from someone who knew that feeling. I chose to hurt because I didn't know how to love. I closed my eyes for a second, not to hold back, but to keep my heart from rushing to something it wasn't ready for. Haley continued, her voice steadying. "I know I don't have the right to ask forgiveness, but I'm asking to stand here to say what I've carried like a stone in my chest for 6 years. She looked at me. For the first time, her eyes held no apology, just acknowledgement. Raw, real, humanly frail. "You endured in silence. I pretended not to see. Today I'm done pretending. I stepped onto the stage, not because anyone told me to, not to save the moment, because it was the right thing to do." Haley looked at me nervous, as if unsure what I'd do. I said nothing. I just stepped forward, placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. No hug, no wiping tears, no forgiveness. Just a hand on her shoulder like a hook to hang resentment on for now. Not forever, but a start. The room didn't applaud, and I was grateful for that. This wasn't a staged reconciliation. This was Haley understanding for the first time what it felt like to stand in the light and not use it to paint herself, but to shine on a truth she'd hidden. If you've been hurt by family but chose to stay instead of turning away, drop a comment. I stayed, not to forgive, but to start a new way of living. After leaving the stage, I didn't look back. No need to see if anyone followed. For the first time in years, I knew, though, a long road lay ahead. I wasn't walking alone anymore. Sometimes victory isn't reclaiming your old place, it's having the courage to not need it anymore. I woke before dawn. No sirens, no phone buzzing in my chest pocket, no emergency meeting waiting. Just the gentle crash of waves below the house and the scent of early oranges carried on the breeze from the Amalfi Hills. The small house I live in nestles under a cliff, whitewashed walls, and blue shutters, red-tiled roof speckled with moss. No guards, no aides, no one saluting as I pass. I live alone, truly, and no one here calls me General Monroe. I'm just Natalie, the woman who sometimes wakes early to brew espresso, drags a chair to the porch to read, and paints. Yes, I paint. Something I thought was a luxury for 30 years in the military. At first, sketches of olive branches, then the sea, then faces. I didn't get to say goodbye to at Bagram Airport. The early paintings were rough, clumsy, but they're real. No one judges them. They don't need to be hung anywhere. They exist because I need them. This morning I was mid-sketch of a seascape when small footsteps echoed by the porch. Luca, an 8-year-old son of the nearby bakery owner, peeked over the wooden fence. "Are you a general?" he asked, his English lilted from Netflix and his parents' whispers. I smiled. I was. Now I'm a survivor. He tilted his head, eyes wide. "What's a survivor?" I set my brush down. Someone who's still here after everything else has passed. He nodded, not fully understanding, but respectful. Kids have a way of listening, adults have forgotten. He ran off, leaving me with cold coffee and a thought I don't need to go back anymore. A week ago, I got an email from Washington, an official offer from the Defense Secretary's office to serve as a special security advisor. High pay, big influence, a chance to keep writing history. I thought about it for 2 days and took 2 minutes to reply decline, not out of anger or to prove anything, but because I'd seen the value of enough. I no longer need a title to prove I've shown up in life. I have, and I left before it consumed what was left of my humanity. If you've lived for others' approval, then one day dared to step back to hear yourself drop a comment, I chose peace. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't going on, but stopping at the right time. As evening fell, I sat by the window finishing a few lines in the leather journal that's followed me from Kandahar to D.C. Now Amalfi. No longer a duty log, just a living log. I wrote, I used to think silence was escape. Now I know silence at the right time is the greatest act of freedom. I once needed a title to enter a room. Now I just need not to lose myself when I leave. And finally, I was once lost, but never gone. I set the pen down. It felt like closing an old door, but not locking it. Just shutting it so the wind no longer creeps in at night. I walked to the beach. Kids played soccer. Old men played chess. No one knew who I was, and I was grateful for that. Tomorrow, I'll teach painting to the village kids. Alone. No reporters, no cameras. Just a woman who once commanded battalions, now teaching how to mix colors for the sky. One thing I learned after 3 decades in the military, and another decade living past the front lines, not all wounds bleed and not all soldiers fall on the battlefield. Some fall in headquarters and sealed offices in the eyes of comrades when they dare speak the truth. I sat in the second row of a small Arlington hall at the first community sharing event hosted by the Resilience Foundation and the Department of Veterans Affairs. No LED screens, no media, no one wearing rank. But the stories told, they were enough to make you want to stand. On stage was a young woman barely in her 20s wearing a white shirt with worn shoulders. Private Emery Tran, Vietnamese American, once stationed at a Texas base. She shared how she was reassigned after reporting harassment by a superior. I wasn't wounded in my legs. I was wounded in my trust, Emery said, voice shaking but eyes steady. They called me too sensitive. They called me the princess of the ranks. I thought I was wrong. Now I don't. Behind me, a chair clattered. An older father stood holding a faded photo of his son in uniform under the American flag. My son was discharged from Special Forces for emailing about unsafe training conditions. A month later, he ended his life. His voice broke, but no tears fell. Maybe they'd run dry after retelling this too many times. I don't need apologies. I need someone to say he wasn't crazy. He wasn't weak. He was braver than the system that trained him. The room went silent, and I knew it was my turn to step up. I had nothing prepared. No notes, no slides. Just hands that once drew strategies now open to catch falling voices. I took the mic, looked straight down, didn't seek a familiar face. I let my eyes meet theirs one by one. I'm Natalie Monroe. I was a lieutenant general, and I was once denied a promotion by my own mother because I didn't fit her image of a perfect daughter. A few nodded. Many knew the story, but I wasn't retelling it to be pitied. I'm here today not for sympathy. I'm here because I know one thing silence, whether from family or comrades, can kill as surely as any weapon. We don't need forgiveness. We need recognition. Scattered applause. Not uniform. Not forced. Just hands that had trembled now clapping in true agreement. I went on. We're not weak for saying we're tired. We're not lesser for asking questions. And we're not alone. I've sat in meetings where core values were preached, then laughed off when someone admitted they were struggling. Now I want those values to live not in slogans, but in ensuring no one is left behind. If you've ever felt like the only one speaking up and got isolated for it, drop a comment. I wasn't wrong for telling the truth. Because every truth teller builds the structure for the next generation. I looked at the father clutching his son's photo. Then I said my final words. If your son were here, I believe, he'd be leading this room. Not because he was stronger than others, but because he chose to say what others feared to hear. I can't bring him back, but I promise we won't let another go in silence. A young officer approached, handing me a simple card. It read, Voice Shield Campaign, a network of psychological and legal advisors for service members isolated after reporting misconduct. I nodded, not out of protocol, but because I knew I was no longer the one enduring. I was the one rebuilding. I stepped off the stage. Someone touched my shoulder. No name asked, just said, "Thank you for standing up before I gave up." I didn't turn, just held their hand for a moment. Your name may be the first thing you're given, but you decide what it stands for. That morning, I stood alone in the Capitol's marble hallway. Dawn light poured through towering glass, slicing neat lines across the floor, as if the building itself was divided before and after old and new silence and voice. No rank on my chest, no medals. Just a name tag, Natalie Monroe. But for the first time, I didn't need a title to go with it. I wasn't here as retired lieutenant general or disowned daughter. I stood here because I'd lived hurt and turned pain into action's language. Today, that language would become law. The meeting room door opened. No fanfare, no flashing cameras, no one standing. And I was relieved. I didn't come to be celebrated. I came to close a chapter, not just mine, but for everyone hurt by those meant to protect them. As I stepped to the podium, I saw clearly a moment from a year ago. Mom in a Georgetown hotel looking at me without apologizing. Haley on the press conference stage admitting fault without expecting forgiveness. And me in Amalfi writing the final line of an old life. I began. I'm Natalie Monroe. I served 32 years in the U.S. Army, and I never thought the day I'd stand before Congress would be to tell the story of my family. Some looked up, a few furrowed brows, but no one left. I once believed the battlefield was only beyond borders. I was wrong. Family can be a battlefield where you're not allowed to fight back, where silence is the weapon, and the one hurt most is the one who dares live true. I paused, long enough for the words to settle. My family stripped my right to be proud, my right to be present, my chance to advance, but I didn't fall. I chose to rewrite the story, not with hate, but with law. Soft pen taps on tables, notes. Some started listening not for my title, but for the story. I continued. The SHIELD protocol, which I'm honored to have helped draft, isn't just a framework to protect service members from internal retaliation. It's a message to everyone pushed aside for being too different, too real, too unpretending. I looked up straight into each row. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not waiting for anyone to say I was right. I'm here to say from today no one will be called a stain on the family without a place to speak out. If you've lived in a family that made you hide yourself, and now you're learning to stand tall, drop a comment, my name is mine. Because you owe no one a version of you but you. After my speech, I stepped back. No wave, no bow. I didn't need to impress because truth doesn't need embellishment. Then the result was announced. The bill passed 68-32. The press called me the woman who wrote law from her own wounds, but I kept no headlines. I kept one line in my head from Emery, that young woman. We're not weak, we're honest. I left the room. No one escorted me. No one stopped me for a signature. But I heard my footsteps echo evenly in the hall. No tremble, no rush, no looking back. I'd been lost in titles ranks and the need for a mother's approval who couldn't love me the way I needed. But now I'd rewritten my story. My name is no longer just a line in a family registry. It's the mark of everything I've lived, endured, and chosen not to silence. And in that cold marble hall, I knew for the first time I'd come home to myself. This isn't just my story, a soldier, a sister, a daughter. It's the story of anyone pushed out of their own family for living true, of those who stayed silent for years to keep the peace, but in that silence were worn down, bit by bit. I've learned not every wound needs forgiving, but all deserve to be named. And not every recognition comes from outside. Sometimes standing up, living true, is the strongest proof. If you see yourself in this story, I hope you know you're not alone. You have a right to speak, and you deserve peace not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Drop a comment if you've ever stepped out of a mold to find yourself. Don't forget to follow the channel for more stories, where pain turns to strength and truth always finds a voice.